Day 37 to 7:52 p.m. Mountain Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Mark stared at Miracle, who was now being controlled by Aphelia. Stop with that address. I'm not Friodelius. I apologize, but that order is not something the lowly me can accept. I pledged myself to serve His Majesty, the last king of Arielis, King Friodelius Arishtalia. As the inheritor of the late king, you are the rightful heir and our new king. Mark shook his head with a bitter smile. Aphelia was still as stubborn as before in Fried's memories. Aphelia Mafariel, she was a maid in the royal palace and Fried's personal servant. At the attack that killed all of the royal family except for the second prince, Friodelius, and the first princess, Eulalia, along with a lot of servants and soldiers from the palace, Aphelia was one of those that managed to survive and became a psychic after a bite at the same incident. After that, she continued to stay and serve the new king along with Keeper. It was a mystery, however, that she was able to exist as a living consciousness. Furthermore, according to Fried, the others were already dead at that time when the crystals were created, and as such, most of their consciousness should have snuffed out even if some of their memories remained. Another thing was that Miracle was only a year-old baby. It was impossible for her to encounter the event 6 years ago and inherit the consciousness and abilities of Aphelia. One more mystery was that Mark was not able to detect Aphelia's consciousness at all even after he recovered a bit of his empathic ability. Mark posed his questions to Aphelia. Your Majesty, at the final battle in our home planet, Arielis, even if my body died, my consciousness would not be easily extinguished. If you would kindly remember my ability as a psychic, Your Majesty. Hearing that, Mark dug Fried's memories and immediately found it. Her ability was to control the psychic zombies that lost their soul and consciousness. Although the number of zombies she could control was limited to 3, the strength of the infected was not inhibited as long as her consciousness could handle it. Due to that, in order to be able to manipulate stronger zombies, she trained her mind and ability to the point of collapsing every day, all in order to be of service to her king. As a result, the strength of her mind consciousness was strengthened, and it was very likely that after dying physically, her consciousness only fell into a state of sleep and was preserved after their abilities and remaining consciousness were absorbed by the crystals. And since she was in a sleep state, Mark was not able to detect her, similarly to how he was not able to detect Carla, who was also asleep until she woke up and took over Colleen's body. With Aphelia waking up from her slumber, Miracle was also affected and woke up from her coma. For the reason that she was in Miracle's body, however, it also explained the loss of sanity of Melinda. Even though Aphelia was asleep until the other day, there were still things that she was aware of. 6 years ago, when Melinda was in America for the checkups of their genetic disorder, a marble-sized crystal fell from the sky and entered her body. However, due to the fact that Aphelia's consciousness was intact and asleep, Melinda was not able to inherit her ability, and Aphelia remained inside her body. Until 5 years later, when she miraculously gave birth to Miracle. Aphelia's sleeping consciousness was transferred to the innocent baby due to her body being more compatible as bearer of Aphelia's ability than the mother. Talking more with Aphelia, Mark learned that she had nothing to do with the sudden growth of Miracle, but it was because her body needed to grow to cope up with the abilities she had. Fortunately, it would likely never happen once more unless there was a huge unnatural leap in the strength of her abilities. After all, her body was not a normal one but was created artificially using the unknown methods Melanie used in the physical crystal that accidentally absorbed by her. This was close to Mark's assumptions. It was really good that this servant was able to witness His late Majesty's inheritor. Aphelia said with a sad smile, "You sounded like you won't last long." Unfortunately, yes. Even if this servant's consciousness was stronger than others, more than 1,000 years was too much. At most, this servant's consciousness could only last a few months more. As that's so, Mark sighed. As he inherited Fried's memories, Aphelia did not feel like some stranger to him. However, like Fried, she was a person that was supposed to be dead and was remaining as a consciousness near to being snuffed out. He then froze. He had an idea. Aphelia, sit beside me. Aphelia was confused but followed without questioning anything. After she sat on the bed, Mark then released a white glow on his hand, and it was the same with his eyes. He then gently held his right hand of her head. Aphelia's eyes dilated in shock and turned to Mark with reverence in her eyes. After several minutes that Mark also felt a little dizzy, he removed his hands and asked, "How is it?" However, Aphelia jumped down from the bed and kneeled once more. "This servant, thank your majesty for your grace." With this servant had no problem to exist even a year more. Her voice was a little waving. It was obvious that she was in tears. However, with her using Miracle's body, it looked more like a father that made his daughter cry and kneel on the floor. "Get up. Miracle is still small, so I will need your help to protect her." "Yes, your majesty." Mark nodded, hearing her reply. As for Miracle calling him father, he decided to accept. It was not like he could make her go to others. He could not just abandon her either. After the talk, Aphelia returned to sleep and Miracle came back. That night, he slept with every single blood children around him, and Miracle was the most clingy of them all. As for Amihan, she was hiding all the duration of Mark's talk with Aphelia. After all, what happened with Miracle looked like some evil possession. She was afraid that she would also get possessed. Along with her fear of humans, she also had the fear of evil spirits which took her parents' lives. Day 38 to 8:03 a.m. Mountain Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. GRWARUGRWAAA. Cute strange noises could be heard inside the base. Looking at it, it was the fox-like wolf, Wargi, playing around Shaflar, who was trying its hardest to ignore the annoying critter. After 3 days of feeding Wargi one crystal, which Mark decided to call Beast Crystal a day, it had grown a little bigger and its fur was shinier. However, it was still a cub. Its tendency to play was so high that it was not even afraid of Chaflar, even though its size was even smaller than the dragon's feet. Gra. Fed up, Chaflar roared a bit. Grew. Wargi let out a scared wail and sped off. However, it still came back about 15 minutes later to annoy the big guy once more, making Chaflar even more annoyed. Everyone was working on their chores around the base. Near the area where Chaflar was resting, a new building was being prioritized, and it was the dragon's stable. Ed and Ron could be seen working on it diligently with smiles on their faces. After their evolution, Ed gained super strength, which was very useful to him as he was doing hard labor. In the base, he was the strongest physically. As for Ron, he gained super accuracy. He able to move his hands with high dexterity, and he were able to hit targets far away accurately with ranged weapons he could use. It was a very versatile ability that could be used in many fields. "Huey, what do you think about them?" Mark asked Huey about the people outside as they stood atop the walls. After all, he was the one in charge of the surveillance around the base because of his abilities as an evolver. Since the people outside came, Huey had been spying on them and was listening to their conversations. To tell the truth, half is unsuitable. Huey sighed. In that group, they were being led by a group of men. 3 of them were our former co-workers, including the guy you reprimanded yesterday. Those guys are scheming people and not good to let them in. Furthermore, it seemed that there are 3 families in that group along with several girls of different ages. The families and the girls seem fine. To be exact, they wanted to get away from the men leading their group. Boss should know why. "All right. I'm in a hurry and just came back to check. It's good if we can let some of them enter. I'll check them personally." "Okay, boss. We still need manpower. The things you brought back yesterday are good, so we will need people to work on farming." Soon, Mark, who was holding Miracle's hand, and Huey went out of the gates and gathered the people outside. There were a family consisting of the parents and a girl, a family with just a couple, and a family of 3 siblings. There were also 4 girls with no blood relation to any of the group members and 3 men who looked like underdogs. Another was 2 children, a boy and a girl that seemed to be taken care of by the couple without children. Lastly, the 8 men that seemed to be the ones Huey was talking about. They all looked unruly and arrogant. Furthermore, they positioned themselves scattered around the group. It was a total of 25 people. Mark really hated standing in front of crowds, but here we go again. He shrugged his shoulders and faced the people. I heard that you all wanted to join my base. However, I don't let people just enter and leave freely, so I prepared some questions and conditions. Hearing that, some of the people gulped. First, how did you all found this base? It's more reasonable if all of you followed the river. If I'm correct, you all came from the west, right? One of the women raised her hand. Mark let her speak. It's because of him. She pointed at one of the three underdogs. He said that he noticed a trail that seemed to be used by people, so we took his suggestion. Is that true? Mark asked the man. Why, yes, sir. My father's hobby was hunting in the mountains, so I learned a bit. All right. Mark nodded. Now, I wonder how all of you lived after the apocalypse. Any one of you killed people before? Everyone became silent. However, Mark could tell that some of them wanted to speak but were very reluctant to. It was because of the men that scattered in their group. Mark then looked at the bald man with muscles. He looked strong, and Mark was sure that he was one of the two mutators in this group. How about you, sir? Why would you ask me? If you don't count the zombies, then I haven't killed anyone. He answered with a straight face. It might look normal, but everyone that did not belong to that group of men had bitter expressions on their faces, even though they tried hard not to show it. Even the children seemed to be afraid of the man. Of course, Mark knew that it was a straight-faced lie. Just how thick was this man's face? That's a lie. One of the four women shouted, but she was immediately grabbed by the man beside her and her mouth was covered. Sir, don't worry about her. My sister here just liked to joke. The woman glared at the man and tried to resist, but that man was the other mutator of the group. There was no way for her to resist. Mark smiled sinisterly. Good. The biters I'm raising needed some fresh meat after all. Day 38 to 8:11 a.m. Moton Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Mark panned his eyes at the people in front of him. Killing people, he was not new to it. At the very start of the apocalypse, the government collapsed and the laws of the country lost its importance. Lives of people became cheap due to various reasons, and a person killing another was not new. He did not mind if these people killed others. What he minded was for what reason they killed. When Mark asked that question, he immediately knew who among them had their hands stained with blood. It was also not hard to distinguish who were those that killed for their desires and those who killed for self-defense. He was an empath after all. He did not need overly troublesome measures like psychological tests or lie detector tests. Unexpectedly, one of the fluctuations indicating that he killed someone came from one of the children, the boy from the two siblings. Interesting. Looking at the boy, it seemed that he was just 9 or 10 and his sister seemed to be just 7. The sister was currently hiding behind the brother while the brother was looking at Mark without any shred of fear. Rather, his fear was all suppressed by his resolve to protect his sibling. Even though he was just a child, his resolve already gained him and his sister the entry to his base. You two, come here. Mark called the two. The couple that was taking care of the two children seemed to panic since they could not fathom what Mark called the two children for. After being called, the sister seemed to hesitate, but the brother gently pulled her and walked towards Mark. Your names? Marcus. C. Chessa. Mark asked their names and the two answered with contradicting expressions. He then looked at Marcus and asked, Who did you kill before? Both children were surprised. Chessa could not help but tighten her grip on her brother's clothes. Marcus, however, inhaled and calmed himself. Our father. This answer surprised everyone. Who would have thought that his young child had killed someone before? It seemed that even the people in the group knew nothing about this. Why? To protect Chessa and mother, and your mother. We don't need her. Marcus showed hate in his eyes. Chessa then hesitatingly interjected with a very small voice. Mother abandoned us. It was a story even before the outbreak for sure. What if something happens to your sister? Mark asked with a stern voice. Hearing that, Marcus's countenance changed and his eyes became fierce. as if he was tearing the person he was looking at from the inside. It was the eye of a predator. Then, the two children felt a hand on their heads. Both of them were surprised that Mark was patting them. Huey. Boss. Take these two inside first. No, Marcus interjected. Aunt Martha and Uncle Joaquin are still here. We can't just leave them. All right. Let's just make the others enter in one go. Hearing that, everyone from the group outside sighed in relief. However, Mark suddenly spoke. Don't be relieved yet. Not all of you are going to enter. Why? A man spoke, but Mark ignored him. Mark then pointed at the three families, the four women and the three weak-hearted men. All of you, I called. Wait in front of the gate. They all did not say anything and just walked. The girls, however, were looking at 8 men that were left behind with eyes filled with grudge. What is the meaning of this? Why are we left out? It was the bald man that asked. He was furious, but the confusion in his face was apparent. His men was scattered among their group, but all of them were separated from the others by Mark. Well, I don't need criminals in my base after all. What do you mean? If you are mentioning criminals, then what is that boy? One of the men yelled and pointed at Marcus. And all of you, after we protected all of you all this time, we will be left out here? The man also yelled at the others. However, the same woman that tried to speak earlier when Mark asked the bald man the first time yelled back. Protected? You say that you protected us? What kind of joke is that? Tears started to flow in her eyes. You animals treated us as cannon fodder. You all used us like toys. Philip, you bastards killed Philip. Mark looked at the girl. What's your name? Althea. What do you want to do with these animals? Kill them. I will do anything, please kill them. Anything? That's something you shouldn't say to a man you know. I don't mind. Please. I want to see them dead. Althea then kneeled in front of Mark. The others tried to stop her while their eyes were also at the verge of tears due to sympathy, but she did not relent. She looked at Mark with hope of fulfilling her revenge. The others seeing this sighed with remorse. They were all present when those events happened. Those men were a bunch of animals that would not even spare the children. In order to protect the young girls from their lasciviousness, the older girls presented themselves. Even the wives were the same, and their husbands were not able to do anything. As for Philip, he was Althea's fiancé before the outbreak. He resisted when the beasts tried to take away Althea. Due to that, he was beaten to death. It all happened in front of Althea, who was tied up that time. Mark smiled and looked at the 8 men. Shit, run. The bald man yelled and the 8 men turned around and tried to run away. However, when they turned around, they saw a black mist passed between them and exploded at the direction they were about to run to. The mist then materialized and their eyes became wide in horror. The one blocking their way was Mark. Some of them turned their head back and saw that Mark actually vanished from his initial spot, and they were not just seeing illusions. There's actually no need to say so, but Mark smiled sinisterly. I apologize, but you already saw my base. I can't leave any of you alive even if she did not request for it. Mark then released the spear, blader. Then, the layered blade of the spear elongated and curved before it rotated to one side. The spear turned into a reddish-black scythe, the symbol of a grim reaper. Bang! The bald man drew his pistol and fired, however. Pang! Mark blocked the bullet with the blade of the scythe in his hands. Like a ghost, Mark appeared and disappeared and instantly beheaded 2 of the men that were close to him. The bald man knew that they were cornered. Even if they were able to fight Mark, there was still the dragon that they saw yesterday. Since it was a fight to death, he decided to bring other people with him. His eyes landed on Miracle, who was left beside Huey. He then pulled back his arm and punched as hard as he could. Normally, he would only hit air, but he was a mutator. His arm stretched forward and even reached a dozen meters. The punch he released instantly arrived in front of Miracle. He smirked, but it did not last long. He felt his body got pulled forwards and flew towards the little girl. In an instant, he saw a small hand in front of his face. He did not remember anything else. A hole was bored into his head and miracles had got stuck in his skull. With a wriggle, the little hand was deformed and was retracted freely. Everyone near Miracle, except Huey and Althea, stepped back when they saw the dead body of the bald man. At Mark's part, the battle already ended. More than 50 outlaws with 10 mutators could not even hold a candle against Mark. A group of 8 beasts in human flesh and 2 mutators would only need a few seconds to deal with. Mark's and Miracle's display of prowess was very surprising to these new people. Different expressions were apparent on their faces, but one thing reigned in their minds. With a powerful person like them in this base, this place was safer than any other. "Baby, are you okay?" Mark said to Miracle and patted her head. Miracle nodded with a smile but frowned as she tried to remove the blood on her hand. "Father, blood tastes bad." "Give me that." Mark took out a cloth from his pocket and wiped Miracle's hand. It seemed that the little bloodchild was actually disgusted with the bald man's blood. "Boss, sorry I wasn't able to react." Huey apologized for his incompetence. "It's fine. You don't specialize in battles but reconnaissance. Still, you better work on that." "Yes, boss." Althea then approached. Her expression seemed refreshed. "Sir, no, boss. Thank you." It was a heartfelt gratitude. Mark turned to her and everyone behind her. "I allow you all to join my base, but there are rules you should all follow." Mark stated the rules he had thought beforehand. First was to contribute within the base. There were a lot of things to be done and more hands were needed, whether it was construction, farming or gathering supplies. Second was that once a person deserted or betrayed the base and had gone against its interest, the person would be sentenced to death. Third, no one was to divulge the base and its location outside without proper reason. This was a mountain base, not a refugee camp. And as such, its existence must remain a secret as much as possible. Fourth, it was fine to leave the base in the future, but the second and third rules still applied. Fifth, within the base, any form of crime would be a move against the base and proper punishment would be practiced. As long as all of you can follow those rules, all of you can freely live in this base and be protected in its walls. Everyone nodded and exhaled in relief. There were no rules restricting them at all. At last, they escaped from the hands of their oppressors. Some of them never thought that this day would come so suddenly. The city was a mess and the forest was also filled with danger. If this place was really safe, there was no reason for them to not contribute to everyone's well-being. "Huey, gather the bodies later. Leave those 2 in the inner chambers while give 2 bodies to Chafflar." Mark pointed at the bodies of the 2 mutators. One was the bald man who had stretching arms while the other was a guy. "Yes, boss. I will send for Ed and Ron to gather them." "All right. Everyone follow us inside." Mark led the group of people inside the gates. Most of them looked timid as they looked around. The people were brought at the northwest side of the base where several houses were built. These houses had blood metal as foundations with wood and clay as walls, a kind of survival house commonly seen in videos in the internet. Although it was just made with those materials, the house was built sturdy and was looking good with an architecture graduate like Huey around. Althea looked around her. It was a new environment, a new home for them. Furthermore, the people in the base they saw were all in good shape, clean clothing and happy smiles in their face as they greeted them. It was the place to start anew. Although the past would not be forgotten that easily, at least, they have a future to look forward to now. They endured a lot in the past month. Although the struggle for survival was still not over, they were now in a better start. Volume 4 End Day 39 to 9:32 a.m. Mountain Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Mark stretched his back as he went out of the crevice chambers with Amihan and Miracle. It was already quite late in the morning and he had just woken up. He stayed up late last night doing something and caused him to oversleep. The atmosphere in the base and the current mindset of people around helped him a lot to recover the lack of sleep in the past days he was not here. He looked around. It was strange that no one came to greet him. That was when he saw what seemed to be everyone in the base gathered at the northeast part of the base. It was the most vacant part of the base since most of the current shacks and houses built was more concentrated at the center and the south area of the base. Mark stealthily approached and no one even noticed him, not even Huey. All of them were concentrated on what was happening in front of them. In front of the crowd, there was Jolene and Alana. The two were entangled in a battle. Both were seriously exchanging attacks, but looking at their faces, it seemed that they were both enjoying the battle. "Boss!" Huey finally noticed and yelled. Everybody was quite surprised that the leader of the base was already here without anyone noticing. However, none of them neglected to greet him or at least, slightly bow at him. Apparently, this kind of greeting was being popularized here by Hallie. Although it was quite strange, it was not really bad, so he let it be. It was better rather than something like a new kind of salute. Actually, it was better if they just did the usual since he was not really used to it, but if he did that, Ophelia would surely reprimand him later on. That servant of Freed was a stubborn one about these kinds of things. She would probably say things about maintaining image and such. Looking at the new people, they all looked several times better than yesterday. Now, they were wearing clean clothes, able to eat enough food to fill their stomachs and slept properly without worrying that someone or the infected might come after them on their sleep. Although the marks of the hardships they had been through could still be seen on their faces and their bodies, at least, they were able to smile now. However, they should really stop their strange glances at Amihan, who was already feeling creeped out. "What is happening with those two?" Mark asked, and he was immediately answered by Nicole and Colleen. Apparently, the girls learned that Alana knew martial arts from Colleen's slip of tongue and Jolene asked for a spar. It all led to the current situation. Jolene's desire for strength and skill was getting larger. Fortunately, it was in a good way. After all, what she wanted was the strength to be able to protect herself and the people around her. The two who was entangled in their fight did not even notice Mark. Watching the two, Mark knew that both of them were in a stalemate. Jolene was lacking in experience and her movements were more or less an amateur, but her ability as an evolver made up for what she lacked and she was able to dodge Alana's sharp attacks. On the other hand, Alana's movements was not a total expert, but at least, she seemed to have years of experience. She was able to dodge Jolene's attacks without problem, but she was struggling to make a good hit on Jolene. Their battle would surely not get anywhere and the two would only stop after the two of them were tired. He then looked at everyone who was watching. Although there were still a lot to be done in the base, a short break and entertainment like this once in a while was not bad at all. Mark decided to stop watching and made his way to where Chaflar was staying to check. Gruawr. It seemed that Wargi was pestering Chaflar again. If Mark did not have control over the large dragon, it might have already eaten the brave little fella. Yesterday, Mark told Huey to bring 2 of the corpse of the men to Chaflar for food. It was not the first time it ate after it became a dragon. Mark traded some meat back in the military settlement to feed it before they left and also fed it more when they arrived the other day. Since it was fond of meat, Mark thought that it would like human meat, but who would have thought that it actually ignored the bodies as if it was looking at disgusting insects. It was like a rich young lady who was tried to be fed with fried coconut worms for the first time. However, Mark immediately realized why. Before the outbreak, human meat might be the tastiest meat animals could find, but now that the animals evolved, their meat became superior and human meat became inferior. It was not only in quantity but also in nutrients. In the end, he told Huey to feed the bodies to the infected inside the chambers. The bodies of the 2 mutators also ended up as infected food after Mark harvested their mutations. He managed to get some weird abilities this time. First was an ability to stretch arms in about several meters, while the second one was to be able to release flames from the pores in the body. Both were rather troublesome abilities, but they were easily dealt with due to their lack of skill. After checking on Chaflar, Mark vanished together with Miracle and Amihan in a puff of black mist and appeared at the top of the crevice overlooking the whole base. "My lord, the base is developing nicely, isn't it?" Amihan said as she watched the base below. Although it looked more crowded for her, it still looked better than before. The mostly reddish-black colored structures gave a good sense of formality, although it also made the base more look like a lair for evil spirits. Fortunately, for Amahan's sake, Mark forbid to clear up some of the trees in the base unless necessary, since a sylph like her should still live side by side with nature. Looking back at the base, Mark could also say that it was developing nicely. The west side where the crevice was located was the area where the living quarters and temporary houses were built. The southwest area was where the animals were being raised and was where Chaflar was also staying. The northeast was still vacant, while the north side was where the pelts from hunted animals were being dried along with some of the fishes caught in the river and some meat. The shacks for crafting stuff was also located nearby. To the southeast was the spring where the bath was also built. It was just a single structure but big enough to allow several people inside. The outhouses were also nearby but far enough to not affect the water in the spring. To the eastern side was also vacant, but it was planned that the place would be reserved for a large joint housing in case that more people came in this place. As for the central area of the base, it was currently being used as the meeting area with the campfire and some chairs made of tree trunks. It was good that Huey was here. The design for the base was made nicely. To the north outside the walls, Mark could see the cleared land with a small part already tilled. This was where they planned to plant the crops, and the area would still be expanded in the future. Mark sat on the edge of the crevice, swinging his feet below. It was really good to take a break from time to time. He just wished that there was something he could watch anime on, play some video games, or at least read some Chinese, Korean, or Japanese novels. Today, he was going to relax. Since tomorrow, he was going to go leave this place once more. This time, he was going to bring Miracle, Amihan, Alana and Colleen with him, and Chaflar were going to be their form of transport. He also planned to take the Parasite Queen along just in case. His first target was the Infanta settlement. The settlement ruled by mutators and evolvers. It was because it would be harder to go to that place after he did his business in the Death Valley settlement first, since he wanted to get slaves from that settlement. The transport would be troublesome if he had more people around. Besides, his only goal in the Infanta settlement was to gather the blood children. There and nothing else. He decided to bring Colleen and Alana since the two were more experienced in the outside world. Furthermore, he would need trustworthy people to leave the management of slaves as he did other things. The preparations for departure were already done yesterday and last night. The protective gear and weapons that would be given to Alana and Colleen were also done. That was also the reason why Alana had the time to accept Jolene's challenge, since today was the rest day for them too. "Father, I'm hungry," Miracle said while Mark was still looking around the area below. Mark sighed and held out his left hand. Without hesitation, Miracle bit on his hand and a wound opened. She then started to suck the blood from the wound. Although Miracle was able to suck blood from the infected, the spoiled girl rather preferred her father's blood. Furthermore, if it was Mark's blood, she did not need to drink too much and she would be full faster than absorbing the blood of the infected or even other humans' blood. "She's really like a vampire," Amihan could not help but voice. "You have seen one before?" Mark asked in curiosity. "I did. They appeared almost at the same time when those people humans called priests came." That was some nice information. Who would have thought that the vampires from the West appeared here along with the Spanish occupation? However, the stories about them in local folklore seemed to be lacking. Something might have happened before which caused them to lay low. Mark looked below once more. It seemed that the show was done and everyone dispersed. He could see Ed walking with Althea for some reason. It was not surprising, however. Yesterday, Ed seemed to be struck by something as she saw Althea for the first time. Unfortunately for him, he still needed to overcome the hurdle called Philip, even if the hurdle was not alive anymore. Behind them was the couple without children, Randolph and Editha Vargas. Both of them were already in their 40s. The two were farmers in Tanay, Rizal, and owned a rather decent plantation. Due to that, the two would be in charge with the farming in the base, and the two gladly accepted as it was the thing they were best at. Still, they were surprised to see the oversized leaves and fruit of the sweet potato Mark took back. It was quite peaceful in this place. If Mark did not have important things to do outside, he would rather not leave this base. However, he could not rest yet. The blood children, he needed to gather them to his base. He also needed to fetch May and his adopted children in Base City. Furthermore, he was feeling restless for some reason, though the effect was rather weak, but he could still feel that something was going to happen. Unfortunately, he could not control his future visions. Freed also told him that these kinds of visions and premonitions come at random, since Mark was not directly linked to the destiny of the living anymore. That was why he was able to peek at times when the barrier was weakened or if something connected to people close to him would happen. He just wished that this restlessness would pass by like air. Day 40 to 10:05 p.m. Barangay Dinahican, Infanta, Quezon. The municipality of Infanta, it was a first-class municipality in the province of Quezon. It was located at the east of the municipality of General Nakar and to the northeast of the municipality of Real that belonged to the same province. Infanta was the largest manufacturer of lambanog, the only native alcohol traditionally distilled in the Philippines. However, that was only before the apocalypse came. Now, Infanta was nothing but an easily defensible place against the infected and feral evolved animals. Infanta, Quezon was filled with branching rivers of various sizes, and there was only one way to make it to the easternmost part of the municipality due to these rivers. However, also due to these rivers, a large number of farms and fisheries could also be found in this place. While these facilities and businesses relied on water, another larger part of the municipality was covered with plantations of coconut trees, which were the main ingredient to make lambanog. At the easternmost part of Infanta, at the barangay of Dinahican, the Infanta settlement, also known as the East Port Settlement, was located. It was because the core area of the settlement was built at the past Infanta Municipal Fishport. It was the most secure area in the settlement, and the newly built manors of the three leading families of the settlement lived near the port. The settlement was being led by the three main families. First was the Ruanto family, which was the family of a local politician in Infanta. The second was the Cristobal family, which monopolized a large share in the fisheries in the municipality. Third was the Salvador family, which was a rich family that owned the largest coconut plantations in the area before the outbreak. With the effort of the three families, the East Port Settlement was built even before both the Port of Real Settlement and Death Valley Settlement was finished. Due to that, they managed to avoid the full brunt of the attacks of the infected and the evolved animals and managed to keep the majority of the population in the area near the settlement. In addition to that, the other two settlements were nearer to the city than this settlement. Because of its location, most that East Port Settlement needed to fend off against was evolved animals from the forests and the sea. Of course, there were still times that mutated infected would be able to wander near the settlement due to their erratic behaviors. This time, 4 people were walking at the northern entrance of the East Port Settlement, an average-looking man, 2 beautiful women and a 3-year-old cute girl. The 3 adults were wearing jackets with strange ornaments and armors on different parts of their bodies, while the child was wearing a simple dress. Of course, it was Mark, Miracle, Alana and Colleen. On Mark's shoulder was a Mihon, while on a clear divided tube that was hanging beside his backpack was Oracle, Crimson and Ivy. Mark was wearing his usual clothes and weapons, but Alana and Colleen looked quite different. Inside their jackets, the 2 girls were wearing the armor Mark made for them. It was a different design and was made lighter due to their bodies. Colleen and Alana both had pistols on their waists and an assault rifle hanged on their backs, but that was not the most eye-catching thing. On Alana's hands, a pair of different-sized gauntlets was equipped. The gauntlet on her right hand was normal-sized, but the one on the left was slightly bigger. Not to mention that it had a large and thick disc around the wrist, and the back of the gauntlet had a rectangular protrusion. Colleen, on the other hand, had her pistol on her right waist, but a strangely shaped long dagger sheathed on the left. If it was unsheathed, it looked like a double-edged long dagger with a wide blade, but the placement of the handle was odd as it leaned to the one side of the blade than the center. It looked like a double-edged cleaver-shaped dagger that should be held the wrong way. She was also wearing bracers on her arms, but the bracers were normal defensive armor, unlike Alana's. Their group was walking towards the gates after leaving Chaflar quite a distance away from the settlement. The place Chaflar was left was a secluded part of the forest where it was free to hunt other animals as long as it would not burn the forest. It was fine to leave it there as Mark was connected to it and he prepared a sort of signal to make it come when needed. Stop. Their group was stopped by the guard atop the gates. Soon, the gate opened and people to check the newcomers came out. Who are you people? A man in his 30s led the group of 8 people. They were all armed with guns and cold weapons. However, it did not matter to Mark that they all had weapons but they are all mutators. Mark thought as he looked at every one of the guards. Low-level mutators. Out of the 8 guards, 7 of them had obvious mutations on their bodies like arms covered with animal fur, strange colored eyes or fangs. Only the leader that spoke did not and looked like a normal human. Mark glanced at the 2 girls and they nodded. The 2 had been here before and with their popularity as actresses, it would be impossible that no one noticed the 2 before. It was just that the 2 were wearing the hoods of their jackets now that their faces could not be seen clearly. We came from the military settlement. The 2 of us had been here before with the army on a mission. Alana spoke as she and Colleen removed their hoods. The men, seeing 2 beautiful women, froze. It was just the leader who kept his composure, but it was obvious that he was also surprised. So, it was Ms. Bautista and Ms. Garces. The guard leader smiled respectfully. It seemed that rather the 2's status as actresses, he knew their other status as the major's daughter and the niece of the leading scientist of the military settlement. You know us? Alana asked. I am Epifanio Mejia. I was there at the previous trade. I belong to the House of Cristobal family, so I was there to help with the matters that time. If you 2 misses did not notice, I was one of the guards of Mr. Cristobal when Major Bautista introduced the 2 of you. Mark nodded when he heard those words. It seemed that there would be no problems for their entry here. Miss Garces, who are these 2 and why did you come from this direction? Normally, we would welcome military delegations at the port. The guard leader, Epifanio, asked. We are here for personal matters this time, so we can't use the military boats for transport. As for our vehicle, we decided to abandon it quite a distance away since it broke down after we were attacked by a large animal. Alana bitterly smiled and told the answer Mark prepared. During military missions like hiring mutators or trades, the military would use boats to go to this settlement due to the fact that the only road that led to Eastport settlement was close to the Death Valley settlement and the possibility of encountering the ruffians was very high. However, the sea was not without a threat and as such, the boats only traveled near land and where the waters were shallow. What is that? One of the guards asked while looking at Mark. No, he was looking at his shoulder where Emihan was sitting. His question took the attention of the other guards away from Alana and Colleen towards Emihan, who could not help but flinch and hug the side of Mark's face. Feeling her anxiety, Mark spoke with an indifferent tone, but the fierce glint in his eyes could not be concealed. Don't stare too much. You all are scaring my companion. His indifferent tone caused a change of expressions on the faces of the guards. The guard leader noticed that glint and signaled his subordinates to stand down. Please, pardon my men. It is just anyone would be attracted to the little girl with wings on your shoulder. Epifanio then turned back to Alana and Colleen. Your group are free to enter, but we needed to list your names first in our ledger and everyone needed to sign the ledger. Please follow me. Led by Epifanio, Mark's group entered the gates surrounded by the guards. The names were listed in their ledger and were signed. Of course, Miracle and Emihan were exceptions to signing with just their names being listed. Please take these cards. Epifanio handed 3 silver-colored cards to Mark, Alana and Colleen. It will allow you to access the Middle District. I would not elaborate about the rules and regulations here since Ms. Garces and Ms. Bautista had already visited before. Just please, follow the rules to avoid trouble. We won't be consuming more of your time. After accepting the cards, Mark and his entourage left being led by Alana and Colleen who had been here before. Epifanio and the guards watched the strange group as they walked away. Captain, we really don't like how that guy stared at us, also his tone. One of the guards said, which made Epifanio sigh and reply. You all needed to learn to read the atmosphere and people. You all stared at his companion without respect. Of course, anyone would be angry at that. It's also better that you all won't mess with that man. I may be just being paranoid, but my intuition tells me that that person had killed people that cannot be counted by your fingers on your hands and feet. The bloodlust around him is thick. The guards were surprised. They knew that their captain's intuition was right most of the time. If it was really the case, it was good that their captain stopped them from making any rash moves. But all of us here in guarding the gates are all mutators. Why would we be afraid? At that point, Epifanio shook his head. All of you don't have direct connections to the families, so all of you might not know. Remember the news about the 4,000 infected horde that attacked the military settlement 4 days ago? We do. They said that a powerful mutator jumped in the middle of the horde and decimated the leader types to weaken the horde. He killed over 100 infected while being surrounded by thousands of infected and still came out unscathed. One of the guards said the exaggerated rumor he heard from the other people, and the other guards nodded as they heard the same rumor. The guards then froze. Captain, are you saying that the mutator in the rumors could be that man? I can't tell for sure, but the possibility is very high. It was impossible for just anyone to be accompanied by the daughter and niece of the two of the most important people in the military settlement. Also, didn't all of you notice? Ms. Garces and Ms. Bautista seem to be his guides here. Hearing those assumptions, the guards shivered. Captain, if someone like that is here, shouldn't we inform the house? All right. All of you stay here and continue guarding. I'll go inform the house head. With that, the guard captain, Epifanio Mejia, left to inform the house of Cristobal about the arrival of Mark's group. ***. Hey Mark, we came here peacefully. Why would you do that? Yeah. That glare was just looking for trouble. Alana and Colleen complained to Mark about his actions. Well, there's no problem, right? I just want to test things. Mark replied with a shrug. Test what? Alana asked. Test if they have information about me. You saw how respectful the leader of the guards. For sure, what happened in the military settlement several days ago had already made it here. That guard leader sure is fast to catch things around him. Hearing that, the two finally realized. It was very possible for that to happen, since there was a constant trade happening between the Port of Real Settlement and the East Port Settlement. In that case, Mark's arrival here would surely stir things up in this settlement. Day 40 to 10:20 p.m. Outer District, East Port Settlement, Barangay Danahican, Infanta, Quezon. Leaving the guard post, Mark, Alana and Colleen walked through the outer district of the settlement towards the middle district that was still several streets away. The East Port Settlement was a rather large settlement. The northern wall had a length of about 700 meters, while the eastern and western walls were around 300 meters long. As for the southern walls, it was even longer due to the fact that the walls were built following the shape of the coastline and the fishing port. The large settlement was divided into 4 divisions, which they called districts. Each district was divided by shorter walls, and people had restrictions on entering every district. The first district was the outer district that spanned from the northern wall to about more than 150 meters away. The outer district was the largest among all the districts and also the most populated. However, the ones that live in the outer district were mostly normal humans and refugees that had no evolver or mutator in their family or group. The next district was the middle district, where most evolvers and mutators stayed. Those mutators and evolvers that had families that were normal humans could live together with their families in this district. The third district was the inner district. The district located just north of the past Infanta fish port. It was where the families leading the settlement lived with their entourage. The people that live in this district were mostly mutators, and all of them pledged loyalty to the 3 families. As for the fourth district, it was the Free Port District, which was the past Infanta fish port. The port was turned into an area where everyone could do business, trade things and hire manpower. Here was where the delegations from military were being welcomed. From the main gates, a single road connected all the other districts to the Free Port District, the General Luna Street. Aside from the main street and the Free Port District, Different colored cards were issued to every person in the settlement to represent their status, and it also indicated which districts could a person access. A white card indicated people that could only access the outer district. The white cards were only given to normal people. A silver card, which was also given to Mark's group, could give access to the middle district. Aside from the mutators and evolvers that were staying at the middle district, these cards were also given to the guests of the settlement, like the military representatives. A gold card could only be held by the people of the three families and could not be issued to anyone else. The last card, which was the black card, was given to important people that did not belong to the three families. Example of this was Major Faustino and Professor Suzuki that held this kind of card. The black card allowed them to access the inner district with the permission of the three families, since they were the leading figures of the military settlement. Walking at the main street that was still within the outer district, Mark could see the difference in treatment of normal people to mutators and evolvers. Since there were more people than the number of shelters, there were people who lived in the streets. In the middle of the cold night, Mark could see children and elderly sleeping on folded cardboard boxes in plain view. Although there were large vacant areas in the outer district, it would be hard to build structures or temporary houses without enough building materials. Besides, it was questionable if the three families would freely allow it. Mark understood what the three families were thinking in their inaction to deal with the problems of the common people. It was to give the evolvers and mutators more confidence in the settlement and to maintain hierarchy in their small community. Even though it was already late at night, there were still quite a number of people in the dimly lit streets. There were electric street lamps on the street, but looking at the structures, these lights seemed to be reliant on solar power, and as such, when the night had gone deeper, the low-quality solar lights became dimmer. There were a lot of women wearing seductive makeup and skimpy clothing. It was obvious what these women do for a living in these dark times. Some of them were looking at Mark's group, especially at Mark, that was an unfamiliar male in these parts. They would surely target him as a potential customer. However, the existence of Alana and Colleen, who was walking beside him, deterred the prostitutes from approaching. After all, compared to the two actresses, the beauty of most of the women waiting in the streets was lacking. "We should head to the middle district to look for the place to stay for the night. It's getting late," Alana said while looking around. Although she said that it was getting late, the real reason that she wanted to find a place to stay was because of the stares they were receiving from the people in the street. Mark had no problem with it, since both Amihan and Miracle were also getting sleepy. They were not afraid that they would not find one, since there was a designated dwelling area for newcomers in the settlement at the middle district. It really showed how the settlement treated evolvers and mutators well. Leaving the main street, they entered another street to the western side of the middle district. There was a guard at the entrance, and they had to show their silver cards in order to pass through the gate. Along the way, the gazes of the people on the street would still land at their group even inside the middle district. After all, they were an odd group of people. It did not take them long to find the large structure after traversing the unpaved street. The three-floor structure seemed to be a large commercial building before the outbreak, since there were store shutters on the closed spaces at the first floor. Now, however, the whole structure was renovated as temporary dwelling for people. Inquiring the woman in charge of the building, there was only a single space free tonight apparently. Fortunately, it was a big one and was divided into several smaller rooms. It was a space allocated for groups of people, since most of them always preferred to stay together than being separated into different rooms. There was no other reason to that than the matters of security. Even though there were rules in the settlement that was strictly implemented, no one could be sure about things that could not be seen. After being guided to their space at the first floor, the woman in charge left. Amihan sighed in relief when she finally left. It was because the woman was staring at her with great interest. She surely even raised her hand and tried to touch her, but stopped when she realized that it was inappropriate. Entering the space and lighting the oil lamp on the table, it was really divided into three smaller rooms. Two of the rooms had king-sized beds. The whole dwelling was not very lavish, but it was more than enough for the people these days. Of course, staying here was not free, but not that expensive either. 2 cans of tuna were already enough for the whole group to stay here for the night. After tucking in Miracle and Amihan, who did not take too long to fall asleep, Mark left Crimson, Miracle and Ivy to take guard and went out of the room. "You're going to leave?" Colleen asked when she saw Mark went out of the room. "I don't plan on staying here for too long. I'll just scout the area so I will know where we needed to go tomorrow." Mark replied, "You better be careful. Although we know that you have a lot of strange abilities, there are people in this place that shouldn't be taken lightly either." Alana warned as she went out of the other room, "I know." Mark was about to open the door when Alana called out, "Wait. Can you also go to the river outside the settlement and fetch water for us? Clean water inside this settlement is quite expensive. We're all sweaty from the activities this afternoon before we came here." Alana said, "You think I'm your errand boy?" Mark squinted his eyes as he stared at Alana. "Please." Alana bowed with both palms pressed together in front of her chin. Mark sighed. "I'll see if I'm able to. Just don't count on it." "Thank you." Mark went out of the room while Alana let out a smile. "Do you really think that he will get water for us? He didn't even bring any container?" Colleen asked. Although she also felt the same as Alana, sweaty and sticky, she was not brave enough to ask Mark. "It's fine," Alana replied. "He's a type of person who won't let his companions down. Just look at how he reacted every time Amihan is being bothered by other people." "If you say so." Leaving their dwelling space, Mark turned into black mist and went out of the building. Under the curtain of the darkness of the night, the mist was almost invisible. He landed on the roof of the building and his figure vanished once more. This time, he did not turn into mist but just became invisible to the eyes of the people. He decided to use the photokinesis mental crystal to fully mask his physical movements. Looking around from atop the 3-floor building, Mark could see how large the settlement was. If he wanted to find the blood children in this settlement, he needed to wander around the settlement first or he would not be able to feel their existence. Even though it would be natural if he just decided to search the middle and inner districts, he decided to search the whole place otherwise. Who knows if someone from the outer district was keeping one? He would not take chances. The route he would use was to search the settlement in a clockwise direction. He would start at the northeast of the outer district and save the northwest of the outer district for last. It was because that the closest river was located to the northwest of the settlement and he could finish the search and fetching water in one go before he returned. Actually, he had no qualms about what Alana said. Even if she did not say anything, he planned to get some since he was feeling the same with his body. There was a reason why they reached this settlement this late even though they left the base before noon. It was because they stopped by the most infected area in Infanta, the barangay of Poblacion 39, to test Alana's and Colleen's new weapons. They took their time to learn to use their weapons while also looking for things to adjust. Due to their fight with the infected, they broke out quite a sweat. Mark walked towards the northwest side of the outer district in a leisurely manner. Although he could use his shadow mist movement, the optical camouflage could not mask the mist effects of his movement ability. It was because the mist was not an effect that relied on reflected light to be seen but because it was the residue of tearing space using his ability. However, who would have known that he would witness an event that was both interesting and infuriating in nature? A pair of teenage boy and girl was kicking up a fuss as they argued in the middle of the street, gathering the attention of the people nearby. Not far from them was a group composed of male and female mutators that looked haughty. Mark shook his head and felt a bit of pity for the man. It seemed that he was being left by his lover to come along with that group. Day 40 to 10:42 p.m. Northwest Side, Outer District, Eastport Settlement, Barangay Dinahican, Infanta, Quezon. Mark walked around the crowd to find a good position to watch the show. Looking at it, the show would finish soon since he could feel that the girl was already determined to end her current life and hope for a better one. Even though it was already deep in the night, the commotion created by the two still managed to gather quite an amount of people. Since there was a severe lack of entertainment after the apocalypse started, a real-life drama such as this would surely attract people. Since Mark could not find a good spot, he jumped onto a nearby tree and sat on a thick branch. The place he found was overlooking the crowd and he was able to see the couple with ill-fated relationship. The boy was a rather lean one, but he was not thin. He looked like about 17 or 18, and even though it was not too obvious, his body had muscles that accumulated due to daily hard labor. His looks were not bad and were slightly above average. Along with his poorly shaped haircut that complemented his face and slightly tanned skin, he could have been a looker if he wore some decent clothing. Unfortunately, what he was currently wearing was some tattered clothes that was obviously not changed for days. As for the girl who looked like about a year younger than the boy, her face was rather good looking and was on the cute side with her small oval face. Unlike the boy who was wearing tatters, she was currently wearing a rather decent pair of blouse and skirt. She was light-skinned and seemed to have a good upbringing at home. Unfortunately, this would also be one of the worst things to have in the apocalypse. The things she acquired in her good life before was what hindered the relationship of the two now that the world had fallen into ruin. "Pearl, are you really leaving me just like this?" The boy grabbed the right wrist of the girl that was about to leave with barely anything in tow. Even though they had a small house to stay which made their lives better than those that were sleeping in the streets, they still barely had any personal items they owned. For the girl, it was likely that everything they had now could already fit that small backpack on her back. "Edsel, I already said this, right?" Pearl shrugged his hands. "I can't stand this life anymore. This past month, we've been enduring. There's barely any food to eat. It is dangerous to get water in the river. Even when we needed to fish, it is hard to get a catch, and if unlucky, the one we catch might even be the one to try and eat us. I always feel sticky and dirty since we can't even get enough water to drink, not to mention wiping our bodies. I'm already fed up with this." "Then where are you going after you leave?" "Someone from the Cristobal family offered me a good deal. Even being just a servant there is way better than staying here. I don't want to keep staying here in poverty and end up like those women waiting at the main street in the future." The grasp of Edsel on Pearl's wrist loosened and soon let go. His teary eyes stared at Pearl's face. He started to lose heart after he saw her determined gaze. "How about the past years we spent together? I'm sorry, we can't be together from now on." With that last line, Edsel looked down in self-pity. His shoulders drooped down. Pearl made a last look at Edsel. There was still a bit of hesitation in her eyes, but the determination to leave their current state of living overwhelmed it. She then turned around and left with that group of mutators waiting quite a distance away. The male leading the group even coiled his arms on her waist, and she did not resist it. Seeing that, Edsel was even more disheartened. "I wish you a good life." Edsel stared at Pearl's back until she vanished from his sight. With the end of the drama, the gallery started to disperse. Some of them looked at Edsel with sympathy while some looked indifferent. However, no one came to cheer him up or talk to him. Even after the gallery dispersed, he remained standing in the place where Pearl left him with his eyes looking on the ground. His heart and mind was in turmoil as he blamed himself for this entire event. Although there was also the fault on Pearl, he would not and could not deny that he was not able to give the life she wanted. "It's because you were weak." He heard a passing whisper in his ear. Even though he clearly heard the voice, he did not know whether someone whispered it to him or he was hearing things due to his emotions. Nevertheless, the voice was right. He was weak. They could only live in the outer district because he was weak. There was not enough water and food because he was weak. Even washing and bathing was impossible because he was weak. "I am weak," he muttered in a very low voice. Turning around, he walked back to his small house swaying like an emaciated person. It looked like all the energy in his body was drained in one go. Asterisk asterisk. "It looks like I found someone interesting," Mark muttered with a smile as he vanished in a puff of black mist and left the area to continue his search. However, he planned to go back here to recruit that person later. It was easier to make a loyal subordinate from a person backed into a corner with nothing left after all. Still, the boy needed to wallow in despair, sadness and helplessness for a bit. He needed to reflect on what he had and what he did not have. However, his desires were severely lacking. As such, Mark used Whisper. It was super effective. Edsel's current circumstances were quite similar to Fried's, and that was why Mark felt a bit of sympathy for the boy. However, That was not the reason why Mark was interested in recruiting the boy who was abandoned by his beloved person. The reason was entirely a different story though. Leaving the west side of the outer district, Mark removed his optical camouflage in a hidden corner of the street. The eastern side of the outer district was more populated than the west side that was closer to the dangerous forest area outside the walls. Because of that, it was questionable if Mark would be able to keep his optical camouflage without accidentally bumping into someone. His shadow mist movement could also be seen either. Furthermore, with the number of people around, no one would likely stop someone like him, and he would also not attract that much gazes since he was alone. Still, he stayed away from the obvious hookers as much as possible. Looking at the state of the common people in the outer district, there seemed to be quite a number of homeless children. All of them looked emaciated and some obviously formed groups to survive this mess together. Still, they were all children. There was very little that they could do. However, Mark felt that they were good candidates to groom. After all, he could see and feel how mature these children were. Compared to most children that could only think of internet and video games in the past, the children that made it through the past month and struggled to survive were better. Furthermore, planting loyalty on children was way easier than adults. In the middle of the east side of the outer district, Mark's eyes lit up. He finally felt the first bloodchild nearby, and it was actually here in the poverty-stricken district. It did not take long. Mark found the house where he could feel the bloodchild. He was quite surprised though, even if he had not knocked on the door yet. Inside the small house made of tattered wood boards and rusty metal roofing, he could feel a family of 3. 2 had weaker fluctuations which were obviously children, while the last one, who had a rather complex mental fluctuation, was surely an elderly. However, the elderly was unexpectedly a mutator. A mutator was currently living in the outer district with 2 children. Furthermore, Mark could feel that the bloodchild inside the house was rather in a good condition. Even better than the ones he got from the laboratory in the military settlement. Tang. Tang. Mark knocked on the door, made of rusty metal than being made of wood. It seemed that the sound inside echoed badly and everyone inside was awakened by the knocks. Mark then frowned. He could tell that the 2 children were afraid while the elderly was cautious for some reason. The fluctuations inside moved and the 2 children noiselessly moved to the furthest corner of their house, while the elderly moved suspiciously at another corner, stopped for a bit like the person picked up something, and slowly moved towards the door. Just what is happening here? He could not help but frown even deeper. A mutator living in the outer district was already suspicious, but their actions after he knocked on the door were rather disturbing for Mark, who came here peacefully. It seemed that there seemed to be a deeper story to this. The door slowly opened a bit and Mark could see a stern face of a man about past 50 in age peeking on the small opening of the door. Seeing Mark, who was an unfamiliar face to them, the elderly seemed to have relaxed a little. "Who are you?" the old man cautiously asked. "I'm someone who just came here in the East Port to look for something. I'm just asking around." Mark replied with a lie. "That didn't answer my question." Hearing that, Mark shrugged his shoulders, just the elderly being the elderly. "You can call me Shade." Mark's answer made the old man look at Mark's face, since it was obvious that it was an alias, but since many people used aliases nowadays, it was not really new. "What can I do for you? I just want to confirm, but do you have a blood-colored slime with you?" The elderly's countenance changed and immediately tried to close the door. However, Mark was faster and blocked the door with his foot, preventing it from getting close. "Damn it. Go away. Return to your boss. We already said that we will have no business with the Cristobal family." Mark's countenance turned dark. Just what did the Cristobal family have to do with me? Furthermore, return to my boss? If this was a joke, it was not funny. The old man tried to push the door close, but it would not budge. Without a choice, he pulled his weapon and pointed it out through the gap on the door. It was a double-barreled shotgun. "Don't push me. Go away or I'll shoot." Seeing that, Mark smiled grimly. "Fine, shoot. Let's see whose grandchildren would wander the streets tomorrow." The old man wavered and was shocked. His eyes were saying that out of all the people that the Cristobal family sent here, Mark was the only one that was not fazed even if the shotgun was pointed at his face. "It's better if you put that down." Mark sternly looked at the old man and his glowing red eyes suddenly brought out a heavy pressure. "I don't know what's going on with your family and the Cristobals, but I have nothing to do with whatever feud you have. I just came here to collect what don't belong here in this settlement." "Why, you really don't belong to the Cristobal family?" The old man tried to confirm once more. "Cristobal family? What kind of animals are they?" Hearing that, the old man finally believed Mark. After all, what he had said was a total defamation against the Cristobal family, and no one that belonged to that family would say something like that. It was because if what they said reached the family, a severe punishment and torture awaited for them. Furthermore, the man outside the door was not even afraid to say those words even when there were people behind that were attracted to the old man's shouting. Please, come in." The old man opened the door and let Mark inside. Day 40 to 11:22 p.m. Northeast Side, Outer District, Eastport Settlement, Barangay Dinahican, Infanta, Quezon. Even though he was still cautious, the old man invited Mark inside their humble home. Since he was invited to enter, Mark would not hesitate to, but first. Mark turned his head towards the bystanders that heard what he had just said about the Cristobal family. His glowing red eyes stared at the people in a threatening manner. Not only that, but they were able to feel a sort of heavy pressure in their minds as his eyes landed on their bodies. The people could not help but turn away as they felt the danger. It seemed that these people were really used to being under such threatening manner and were sensible enough to know what they had to do. This time, they only need to shut up about what they had heard or their lives might face peril. Nodding at their reactions, Mark entered the house casually and the old man closed the door. Looking around, the house was really small. The living room in Mark's house was even bigger. There was only one single bed with a mattress, while a cardboard slightly covered with a tattered blanket was on the floor beside the bed. Obviously, the two children slept on the bed while the old man slept on the floor. On one corner of the house, a makeshift stove made of 3 pieces of charcoal-stained hollow blocks was made. There was only one stool and a small table in the house due to the lack of space. As for their source of light, an old tallow lamp could be seen on the small table. The whole house seemed to be cleaned as much as possible, but since they were cooking using firewood inside the house, the underside of the roof and other places in the house had traces of thick soot. "Sorry if our house is small and I can't offer anything. Please sit here." Pulling the only stool in the house to give to their guest, the old man cautiously and respectfully spoke. The old man then sat on the bed and called over his grandchildren. Still, the old man was keeping the shotgun to his side, but it was a reasonable thing to do. Although he invited Mark into his house, his intentions was still vague. It was not like it mattered to Mark though. Mark turned at the two children. The older one was a girl about 9 years old and the younger child was a boy about 7. Strangely, the boy had scars on his arms and face. Unexpectedly, the older sister was holding the blood child with bare hands without any kind of protection. Normally, it was rather impossible since the blood children had a high tendency to attack. This made Mark smile a bit. The blood child was surely treated good to open up like this to these people. Still, Mark was surprised inside for another time. The color of the blood child was not red like the normal ones. Grayish-white, it was the color that the blood child had. Seeing Mark looking at the slime on his granddaughter's hands, the old man spoke as his grandchildren sat to his side. "Can I confirm one more time? Are you really not one of the men from the Cristobal family? If not, what are your intentions to visit us this late?" Looking back at the old man, Mark replied, "I have no connection to them or anyone living within this settlement. I'll be frank. I came to this settlement to take that back." Mark pointed at the blood child. That made the faces of the two children bitter. The older sister then spoke. "Take it back? Did it perhaps belong to Mr.? We accidentally found it by the shore near the port when we accompanied Grandpa to fish?" That was another surprising thing. From the site of the plane crash to the shore of Eastport Settlement, It should be more than 50 kilometers following the Ungos River and the shallow coastline. If what the girl said was true, then, this bloodchild probably traveled more than that distance to arrive there randomly. The experiences that this bloodchild had might be the reason that it turned into this color. To the girl's question, Mark shook his head. She doesn't belong to me. She belongs to her home where her brothers and sisters are waiting. Home, brothers and sisters, the girl muttered and glanced at her little brother before turning back to Mark. If that's why, I'll return it. No, her. She's a girl, right? Mr. said so. Are you sure, Leon? You really like it, right? Rather than a pet, you treated it like your sibling. Alois even got jealous about it one time. The old man asked the girl, Leon. Hearing his grandfather, Alois, who was not talking since the start, blushed. It's fine, Grandpa. Alois and I know how hard it is to not be with father, mother and older brother anymore. Salacia might also feel the same. The girl smiled, but the loneliness in her eyes could not be masked at all even in the dim light of the lamp. Mark's eyes lit up this time. The girl had a mature mind compared to her age and a kind personality. It was no wonder she was able to tame the bloodchild on her hands, who was apparently named as Salacia. Salacia, huh? The Roman goddess of saltwater, is it? It's good choice for a name. Did you give it to her? Mark looked at Leon, who looked surprised. Mr. knew about it. Mother always told us stories about mythologies around the world. That is where I got the name. Leon stood up in an enthusiastic manner. Alois had a helpless expression while their grandfather shook his head with a bitter smile. It seemed that this was not a new thing. Realizing that she had made a blunder in front of their guest, Leon timidly sat down. However, it seemed that her fear of Mark, who was a stranger, was totally gone now. All right. I decided. Mark spoke, which made the three suddenly look at him. Ignoring their stares, Mark faced Leon. I'll take Salacia back, however, I'll ask you something. What is it? Leon was flustered. Do you want to continue taking care of Salacia? This time, the old man interjected. Please wait a minute. If you are taking it back, how will my granddaughter take care of it? Simple. I'm inviting you three to my base, but... The old man hesitated. It was the same for the two children. I won't force you three. But, with the state you three are living here, it's better to live somewhere else. If I'm correct, you three are also experiencing harassment from the Cristobal family, right? I'm telling you, the people in my base live better than most people here in this place. Mark's words turned the man's expression into a very complex one. I'm sorry. We can't just decide this immediately. We don't even know you. All right. I'll come back here next time before I leave the settlement to hear your decision. Also, forget the alias I told you earlier, the name's Mark. In any case, can you tell me the reason you all seem to hate the Cristobal family? Hearing that they still have time to decide, the old man felt relieved. With his experience, he found that even though the man in front of them barely had any change in his facial expressions, he was saying the truth about Salacia and his invitation. Then, the old man, Hamlin, told Mark what had happened. It all started when they were still living in the Middle District. In the Middle District, a normal person was able to live there if they had a relative, friend or teammate that would live together with them. However, the mutators whose superiority complex had reached high levels would still scorn these people. That was why the normal people living in that district always felt that their necks were tied up. They had to be careful about their movements, and it was better if they stayed inside their dwellings. One day, however, when Hamlin was not around, Alois accidentally bumped on the young master of the Cristobal family and was heavily beaten. Leon could only watch to the side in tears. Since the rules inside the settlement about murder could not be broken, the poor boy was spared with his life, but the beating he received left scars on his body. It was fine after that, and since Hamlin was a mutator, he received compensation for what happened to keep quiet. However, another issue came when they found Salacia. Since it was impossible to hide Salacia the first time they found her near the port, many people witnessed it. It reached that same young master and offered to buy Salacia. However, Who would want to do business with the person that hurt and left inerasable scars on his precious grandson? That was when the men from the Cristobal family started harassing them. His silver card was also revoked and he was reissued with a white card. They could only leave the middle district and live in this poverty-stricken outer district. Since there was a lack of houses and dwellings, Hamlin built one for whatever material he could get his hands on, and it was this small tattered home. Of course, the harassment did not stop. Rumors that slandered Hamlin and his grandchildren started to spread. All of the rumors were about the reasons why a mutator like Hamlin and his family was thrown out of the middle district. Even though none of the rumors were true, no one would believe Hamlin even if he defended his family. Furthermore, there were times that they would be disturbed in the middle of the night because of a rock hitting the walls of their house and roof. Sometimes, a person from the Cristobal family would also send their men to ask for Salacia, but of course, Hamlin declined them at gunpoint. Even though they were under orders of someone, no one in the right mind would gamble with the gun pointed at them, and they all left cursing. It was until Mark came, who was not even faced while a gun was pointed at him. "Why is that young master too persistent about Salacia?" Mark asked, and the old man sighed. "Because of a woman." "A woman?" "You see, the young lady of Salvador family had a hobby of collecting strange things, animals and creatures that appeared. I heard that they even bought a few slimes similar to what we have from the people of Death Valley, and those were her favorite. She also heard about ours and offered a trade, but since Leon had already taken a liking to it, I declined. They peacefully accepted my rejection, unlike that young bastard of Cristobal family. I bet that he wanted to get ours to gift it to the young lady to gain favor." The old man told the story while clenching his fists. "That young master, what did he look like?" "He's a handsome man who is 25 years old. His hair that is about as long as his nape is dyed blonde. He always wears an expensive-looking leather jacket." Hamlin described the young master's appearance, and Mark immediately realized that he already saw the person. In any case, his view of the Cristobal family was getting worse. "Give me Salacia," Mark told Leon, and she immediately followed. "Be careful, she might attack." "Don't worry." Before Leon could even hand Salacia to Mark, the bloodchild was already on the verge of jumping towards Mark's hands. When she landed on his hands, Mark stealthily made Salacia absorb his blood. Its grayish-white color then changed, and its color was mixed with a tint or red and black. Leon was surprised. She wanted to ask what happened, but before she could even speak, tang, tang, tang. "Hamlin, come out." Trouble came knocking on the doors, literally. Day 41 to 12:10 a.m. Hamlin's house, northeast side, outer district, Eastport Settlement, Barangay Dinahican, Real, Quezon. The family of 3 had already settled down from their fear and cautiousness before and was already able to lower their guard as they properly talked with Mark. Unfortunately, the already lightened atmosphere inside the humble home turned heavy once more. Mark already noticed that there were people approaching outside. That was why he suddenly asked Leon to give Salacia and made the bloodchild absorb his blood. As Hamlin said, the men from the Cristobal family always came at a very uncanny time. It would still be reasonable if they came during the day, but a frequent visit in the middle of the night when the people in the house were supposed to be sleeping was totally outrageous. The faces of the old man and his grandchildren in front of Mark reflected the distress they felt because of the harassment they had been going through. In any case, this family took good care of Salacia, so he would not mind helping them this time. Ignoring the loud knocking and the shouting outside the door, Mark took out a wristwatch he was keeping on the pocket of his jacket to check the time. Seeing that it was already past midnight, he decided to depart already. "It's already late, I need to go." Hearing Mark, the 3 was surprised, but considering that it was true, they could only make bitter faces. Furthermore, Mark had nothing to do with the current trouble and they could not bother him. Then, the 3 were surprised once more as Mark took out 3 small cans of corned beef and a flat rectangular clear container that obviously contained several pieces of perfectly dried meat. Since what the 3 ate all this time was river fish, seafood and rarely, fruits from the forest, they had not eaten any kind of meat of quite a while. The mouth of the two children looked like they were about to drool, and they even forgot their anxiety about the shouting outside. I leave these for you three. It's for taking good care of Salacia. I'll also take care of the trouble outside. Hopefully, they will leave you three alone after this, but don't count on it too much. I will come back here tomorrow afternoon for the decision of you three. If you three decide to move to my base, then pack up your things before I return. Mark stood up without waiting for the three to respond. But then, he turned around, making Salacia face the three. Under the grandfather and the two grandchildren's dumbfounded eyes, a short tentacle stretched out of Salacia's body and waved as if saying goodbye. In return, Layan and Alois also waved at it. Outside the door, the shouting started to get louder and the knocking became faster and stronger. After all, even though Mark toned down his voice to speak, the thin walls of the house still made his voice audible outside, though it would be hard to understand what exactly he was saying. There were three men outside. They were already getting impatient. Normally, the old man had already opened the door after several knocks and shouts. This time, however, even though it was obvious that they were awake inside the house and a light source could be seen from the small holes of the walls, no one was opening the door for them. The man by the door was about to knock on the door once more with a stronger force. His posture was not even knocking but looked more like punching. It seemed that the man would not care even if the door would break. However, the door opened the moment he released his fist, causing him to almost lose his balance. When the door opened, he was in a very awkward pose since he tried very hard to maintain his balance. The two other men behind him even let out muffled snickers. He wanted to vent out his embarrassing moment and shouted, "Hamlin! Why didn't you?" The man was not able to finish his sentence at all. When he looked at the person that opened that door, it was not Hamlin but Mark. However, what the man noticed first was not Mark's face but Salacia, who was on his hand. After all, Salacia was the reason these people were here. With a stern stare, Mark spoke. "Can you cut it out? Knocking like a mental patient on someone's door in the middle of the night. Just how did your parents raise you? Are you a person without proper breeding?" The man stared at Mark wide-eyed due to his barrage of insults. F***CK. Who are you to insult me, huh? Don't turn it around, will you? I'm a guest here and you're just someone who seems to be an intruder. Just where did you find the right to ask who am I? Mark spoke with a tone full of scorn. The man wanted to retort but Mark continued as he gently closed the door behind him. "Also, can you get out of the way? Only someone retarded would block someone else's doorway." He then pushed the man backward, making him step back. Ignoring the three, Mark turned around and started to leave. "Please, wait." One of the two men behind the one that knocked on the door spoke politely. "We came here for that creature on your hand. Why is it with you?" "Oh, this?" Mark pointed at Salacia. "It's mine, so why can't I bring it with me?" The three men were dumbfounded. "Wait. Sir, Hamlin did not want to trade it with our young master. How did you get it?" "What are you talking about? It's mine in the first place. Even before whomever young master you had tried to trade for it. I'm just busy that I let Hamlin take care of it until I can get it back." Mark feigned to walk away but paused and turned again, facing the three. His rather carefree manner but scornful eyes glowed red and became filled with killing intent that not only the three men but also the bystanders and the homeless around them could not help but feel cold. "About this, I heard from Hamlin that you idiots have been harassing them while coveting something that is mine. It's better if you people stop. Otherwise, you people might not be able to come back to that bastard of a young master of yours." After that, Mark turned around and left the people that were frozen. It took about a minute before the three men who was directly assaulted by the feeling of death managed to recover. "You two, chase him. We need to get that slime no matter what this time or young master will kill us." The one that did not talk to Mark hurriedly shouted as he saw Mark turned around the corner of the street. However, all the people around seemed to look at the three in horror and tried to stay away as much as possible. "Eldest bro, are you sure about that?" The polite one, the youngest among the three, spoke, which made the two look at him. Then, their faces paled. His face was horrifying. Both his eyes, both ears and nose were bleeding for some unknown reason. "Bros, don't look at me like that. Both of you are the same." Hearing that, the chill in their bodies intensified as they touched their faces. Looking at their hands filled with blood, their bodies started shaking. Then, they started to feel the delayed pain in their heads, and the three crumbled down to the ground wailing in pain. In the unforeseen future, the horrifying wails of three men from the Cristobal family as their eyes, ears and noses bled were told as a story of the cursed men. Seeing what happened to the three, curious people chased after the street that Mark went to, but his traces were not found. Not even a shadow. Some passing mutators with a good sense of smell also tried to find him, but even his smell vanished. It was as if the man vanished like a ghost. Leaving the commotion he created, Mark vanished from a blind spot in the street and moved at the sky, using any strong structure to propel him to his desired direction. What he did to the three as a warning should give the poor grandfather and grandchildren some peaceful time. It was a good thing he had his empathic ability that did the work. Also this time, they used something that he never used before, and it was to delay the pain they would feel after their subconscious were filled with chaotic emotions. That was why the eyes, ears and noses of the three were already bleeding before they were able to feel the pain. It was done by stimulating their subconscious to trigger the flight or fight response of their body and causing the adrenal glands to release adrenaline and numb their heads from pain. After the adrenaline that was released in small amounts started to lose effect, they finally felt the pain in their heads after they felt the horror of having their face bleed like they had been cursed. Unfortunately, he could not just kill them. If he did, it was very likely that Hamlin and his grandchildren would get dragged into the mess. He really wanted to separate the heads of those three from their bodies. Also, they were just lackeys, killing them would not matter, and the cause of these things would just send another nuisance. Going from roof to roof, Mark was headed towards a particular direction. It was towards the inner district. From Hamlin's story, the young lady of Salvador family was collecting strange creatures that appeared after the apocalypse started. It meant that the possibility of finding a blood child, there was 100%. Also, from what he deduced, there was no other blood child in the settlement that was not bought by the Salvador family or the other two families. If there was, that young master of Cristobal family would not be patient enough to stage his harassments to Hamlin's family just in order to get Salacia. Since it would just be given as a gift, he could just get another from other people if there were still others. While he was moving towards the inner district, he was also observing Salacia, who was overly curious about what was happening around her. Unlike the others, Salacia was not as clingy. She was more mature and, to say, independent, compared to the other blood children. Well, there was a very high chance that Salacia was the oldest among them. It did not take long with Mark's speed and he reached the walls of the inner district. To say, the state of the inner district was way more lavish compared to the other districts with the exception of the Freeport district. Furthermore, the district was divided into 3 blocks and each block had its walls and mansion. Each blocks had a high number of guards, even a higher number compared to the number of people guarding the walls of the settlement. Another thing was that the guards were all mutators and evolvers. Mark was not sure if he would be able to enter the place undetected with just his optical camouflage. For sure, the traces his shadow mist movement could also be detected. The only way he would be able to search was to traverse the sky, although it would tire him more easily. Without any choice, Mark and Salacia flew over the district. It was lucky that the night was rather cloudy and the darkness hid the waving mist in the air as he used his movement ability. Finally, he found the place. It was the block nearest the Freeport district and the main street. For sure, the mansion belonged to the Salvador family since it was the largest compared to the other two. At the southwest side of the mansion on the 3rd floor, Mark felt 4 signals coming from the blood children. Mark was rather happy feeling the signals. He could tell that the blood children were rather taken care of properly. It seemed that the young lady of the Salvador family did not collect the strange creatures for fun but to actually care for them. Day 41 to 12:59 a.m. Cristobal Mansion, Inner District, Eastport Settlement, Barangay Danahican, Infanta, Quezon. In the block of the Cristobal family, a rather large mansion was built. It was a modern mansion that had 3 floors and an accessible rooftop. Although the rooftop was accessible, unlike before the outbreak where the rooftops were used for leisure and entertainment, this rooftop was made in order for the people here to be able to defend against the enemies attacking from the air like birds and insects. Unlike the block of the Salvador family where the number of guards was lower, guards were patrolling around the block of Cristobal family 24/7 in groups of 3 or 4. All of them guards were equipped with assault rifles and pistols. The security was too tight that it felt very stifling to anyone that saw it. At a rather lavishly decorated room at the 3rd floor, seductive moans could be heard even outside. It was the room of the young master of the Cristobal family, Ace Bryant Cristobal. Inside, Ace was indulging in the pleasure with a woman. If Mark was to see this, he would immediately recognize the girl that he witnessed earlier that left her loyal lover for riches. In the middle of their private session, a rather loud and panicked knock on the door disturbed their passionate mood. Ace could not help it and his temper flared up. He had already told his men to not disturb him and yet, someone knocked on the door. Covering his lower body with a towel, Ace stood up with a dissatisfied face, leaving Pearl on the bed, who also covered her thin body with a blanket. Opening the door, Ace looked at the man who was one of the leaders of the guards in their family, Epifanio Mejia. Since this man was a direct subordinate of his father, he could not openly shout and curse him, but he still showed his dissatisfied expression. If he remembered correctly, this man should be leading the guards at the gates of the settlement tonight. If there was a problem, this man would directly report to his father. This made him confused as to why the captain of the guards was here knocking on his door. "Young master." Epifanio saluted. "What's the problem?" 3 mutators were attacked and fell unconscious at the outer district. If we are not mistaken, they should be your men. I remember seeing them with young master several times before. They should be the Jimenez brothers under you. What? Ace was shocked. He sent those 3 tonight to take the slime that the poor family in that district was keeping. Unlike the previous times where he sent people that only needed to harass and threaten that family, the 3 tonight were tasked this time to make a move and forcefully take the slime. He wanted to give that slime as a gift to the young lady of the Salvador family, and her birthday should be coming in a few days. What happened? Who would dare mess with my men? Young master, it was rather complicated. It is better if you see them for yourself. The master is also coming to check. Epifanio replied in a humble tone, but there seemed to be something that he hid. Father is already there. All right, wait for me. I'll just wear my clothes. Day 41 to 1:05 a.m. Salvador Family Block, Inner District, Eastport Settlement, Barangay Danahican, Infanta, Quezon. On another block not far away from the Cristobal family, Mark prepared to infiltrate the mansion of the Salvador family. Mark knew that making a trade with this family in exchange for the blood children was too slim. In that case, he would enter the mansion secretly and take them without alarming anyone. Still, it would not be easy. From Mark's position, he could see the guards around the block in the mansion. Although the security here was not as tight as the other 2 families, he could tell that the mutators here were on another level. They looked strong and alert, as if they were trained as soldiers. It seemed that rather than quantity, the Salvador family made up for quality and strength. Well then. Salacia, are you ready for a skydive? Mark spoke, making Salacia wiggle in confusion. Without wasting any more time, Mark jumped up as high as he could before he vanished into a puff of black mist. Blanketed by the cloudy night, Mark waved diagonally upwards from outside the block to the direction of the room he was feeling the 4 blood children. Since there was quite a distance from his starting point to the mansion, there was a high chance that he would be detected by the people below, and that was why he was advancing upwards at a steep angle, and he would skydive from above the mansion and enter that room. It did not take long and Mark landed on the roof of the 2nd floor balcony that was directly outside the target place. The fall was quick, but he managed to decrease the speed with his shadow mist movement, without problems. Salacia was shaking in his hands though. Although it was still a mystery as to how the blood children were able to perceive their surroundings, Mark could tell that his skydive just now scared Salacia. As he landed on the roof and the rather large room was now within the span of his emphatic detection, he was quite surprised. Outside the block, he could only detect the blood children, but now, he could detect about a dozen more creatures inside the room. Most likely, these were all among the animals and creatures that the young lady of the Salvador family was collected. Furthermore, Mark could also detect someone sleeping inside. Mark looked around to see if someone spotted him from below, but it seemed that he was still in the clear. There were guards below and around the walls of the block, but none of them seemed to be behaving strangely. There was only one window in the room, even though it was a large one, and it was locked. Mark then let out a blood whip and made it liquefy a little, enough to make the blood whip to be controlled as it seeped at the small spaces around the window to unlock it. Creak. The window creaked as Mark opened it slightly from inside. Even though the window had metal railings, Mark used the space distortion of his shadow mist movement to enter the small space between the railings and the small opening of the window. Tap. Tap. Mark's feet landed inside the room with two faint tapping sounds. It was really big. The size of the room already had the same floor area as his house in Bacor. It was not lavishly decorated, but the furniture around the room was complete. The bed inside the room looked like a princess bed that could be seen in movies and dramas. There was the young lady of Salvador family sleeping on it. He then looked around the room. It was because he felt several pairs of eyes staring at him. Aside from the furniture, there were several cages and aquariums of different sizes inside the room. Each cage and aquarium contained at least an animal or insect. Since it was very dark in the room, he could only make out the shapes of some of the animals but could not see them clearly. However, that was not the disturbing thing. He was sure that there was something strange going on. Immediately, he noticed some strange fluctuations coming from some of the animals. Mark then turned his stern gaze at the princess bed in a defensive stance. Katja. Who are you and what are you doing in my room? How did you manage to enter? The woman who was supposed to be sleeping sat up with a .45 caliber pistol pointed at Mark. She spoke in an imposing manner. However, she then froze as she looked at Mark for some reason. She was even shivering as her imposing manner vanished and was filled with both fascination and fear. It made Mark feel rather strange. However, he did not come here for trouble but just to retrieve the 4 blood children. That sea creature on your hand. It should belong to that family at the outer district. Why is it with you? Did you do something to that family? The girl spoke in a rather inconsistent tone. However, Mark could tell that her feelings was not because he had Salacia but because of him. Nevertheless, Mark could feel a bit of genuine worry from the thought that Mark did something to Hamlin and his grandchildren. It was enough for Mark to judge the personality of this girl. Don't worry about Hamlin and the children. I asked them for this and they willingly gave it. It doesn't belong to them after all. Mark spoke. What do you mean that it don't belong to them? What you heard is what it meant, simple. I came here to do the same. I came for the 4 you had with you. I want to take them back. Take them back, you say? You didn't come here to abduct me or do something to me. Mark was dumbfounded. Just how was this girl raised by her parents? That question was filled with innocence. However, Mark could detect shrewdness from her emotions. Stop with that innocent act. Seriously, you're really a daughter of a business-oriented family. Anyways, as long as you don't do anything dangerous, I won't lay my hand on you. TCH. The girl clicked her tongue. You think an intruder like you can do what you want in here? Everyone, get ready. The girl's voice turned stern at her commanding voice. Mark then sighed. His intuition was correct. Some of the animals inside this room were really strange. The moment that the girl let out her command, the animals with strange fluctuations opened their cages on their own and went out. They were all ready to fight Mark. Looking back at the girl on the bed, Mark spoke. It's better to stop what you want to do. I know that you really care for your pets. They will get hurt if you make them attack me. HMPF. Let's see what you can do. Attack. With her command, 10 different animals were about to attack as several different animal sounds echoed inside the room. However, they all froze. Then, the snake the size of an adult leg started wriggling on the floor. The mastiff-like cat rolled on the floor. The hawk-sized sparrow fell on the floor, and the other animals were the same. Those that were weaker immediately fainted, while those that were stronger wailed in pain. The young lady was dumbfounded. She looked at the intruder in her room, whose eyes were frighteningly glowing with red glow. Her shivering body became even worse. Mark smiled bitterly in the dark and stopped the release of negative emotions towards the animals that were all lying on the floor. "I told you. They will get hurt. Don't worry, they won't die. Just make them rest until tomorrow." Ignoring the animals on the floor and the girl on the bed, Mark made his way towards the cabinet on the further side of the room. Although the girl still had the gun pointed at Mark, he was not worried about it. She already had lost the will to fight and would only retaliate further if he came closer to her. On top of the cabinet, 4 covered fish bowls were placed. Inside each fish bowl was a blood child. 2 of them had the normal color, while one was silver colored, and the last one was bright red with a faint glow in its body. Mark opened each fishbowl and touched the blood children, one by one. Under the eyes of the girl that was dumbfounded even further, the 4 slimes affectionately responded to Mark and were even rubbing their gelatinous bodies on his hand. "All right, I'll be taking them." Mark hugged the 5 blood children in his arms and vanished in a puff of black mist and fled out of the room through the window. He really wanted to put the little critters inside his bag, but he had no time left. The wails of the animals were surely heard by the people within the mansion, and he detected several people approaching the room from the hallway. Since he had no plans to fight here, he could only flee. Retrieving the blood children, his most important business in this settlement, was finished. Getting them out of the Salvador family mansion was rather easy. Or is it? Day 41 to 1:15 a.m. Salvador Mansion, Inner District, Eastport Settlement, Barangay Dinahican, Infanta, Quezon. "Anika, are you fine?" The current head of the Salvador family, Darren Bryce Salvador, rushed into through the door of his daughter. A sudden report came in, so he was at the first floor of the mansion even though it was this late. Due to that, he needed to rush up to the 3rd floor and had just arrived after the guards. His wife and his 2 sons were already inside the room of his daughter. Darren was a rather fit-looking man who was already in his late 40s. Like other rich businessmen, he inherited their family business from his parents, but also different from them. He was born even before their business family started. In a simple description, he was a successful businessman of humble birth. Because of his background, he did not look down on the weak and the poor. Still, while he was a serious and stern man outside their home, he was a strict, loving and protective husband and father to his family. The news of his daughter's room being infiltrated made his heart pound fiercely. He even left the office and his reporting subordinates without hearing the whole report. "Dear, don't shout." Maitia, Darren's wife, who was a kind-looking woman in her mid-40s, reprimanded Darren for shouting as he entered the room. "Your daughter is fine. Nothing happened to her, see?" Darren looked at his daughter, Anika, who was sitting on her bed surrounded by his wife and 2 sons. He then scanned the room and saw the guards that responded first, who were checking the animals that was not moving around the room. "Anika, what happened here? You're really not hurt? Are your pets dead?" Darren approached his daughter's bed and caressed her head gently as he asked. Anika then shook her head. "Dad, I'm fine. The person that entered my room did not do anything to me. My pets are also not dead. I think they fainted." "Thank goodness. Why would someone infiltrate your room if that person did not come for you?" "Dad." The eldest son, Raybert, spoke. "That person took the slimes we bought from the traders that came from Death Valley." "What? Why would someone?" "Wait." Darren stopped talking and tapped his chin while thinking. "Did you realize something, Dad?" the second son, Riley, asked. "The reason I was late was because 2 personnel we had in the outer district gave 2 different reports. First was they saw Miss Colleen Bautista and Miss Alana Garces enter the settlement with a man that was suspected to be the person in the rumors that came from military." "Dad, Is he the man that fought with the horde and had a dragon as pet? Annika suddenly moved closer to her father with eyes filled with anticipation. Dear, what does that man in the rumors had to do with this? Is he perhaps the man that stole our daughter's pets? It is very likely. Remember the family in the outer district that was also keeping a slime as a pet? Darren asked, which made the others nod. Although it was not confirmed fully, it seemed that the same man came to take the slime from that family. Did he also steal it? Maitia asked. It doesn't seem so. It seemed like the family gave it willingly and the man dealt with the harassers that had been pestering that family for a while now. Since Dad know who entered Annika's room, should we go after and catch him? Raybert suggested. Unexpectedly, no, don't, Annika shouted in protest. Why? I think the rumors are just fabricated lies. I don't believe that with our forces, we can't subdue that guy. We can't just let him go after entering your room. Raybert insisted with a stern voice. However, the father did not consider Raybert's idea and looked at Annika, who was panicking at her eldest brother's suggestion. Annika, what did you see? Darren asked in a stern voice. Annika looked at her father and spoke. We can't win. He's the strongest mutator I saw. Also, aside from the same energy from mutators he also have several energies in his body that I saw for the first time. All those energies are circulating peacefully in his body that it looked beautiful. Elise Annika Salvador, the 14-year-old young lady of the Salvador family. Her ability as a mutator was to be able to see the energies circulating inside the bodies of the person or animal she was looking at. However, she also had another ability as a psychic, and it was to form mental links with animals that recognized her as their owner or master. Then, we'll just let this go? Riley asked, making everyone silent aside from Annika. Dad, I want to see that person. She requested earnestly. If he let me see the dragon, I will give him the slimes, since I really can't tame them no matter what I do. Also, I haven't seen Big Sister Colleen and Big Sister Alana for several weeks already. I want to meet them. Asterisk 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 day 41 to 1:20 a.m. Sabong River, Baranagay Danahican, Infanta, Quezon. Mark sat beside the river inside a forest quite a distance away outside the settlement. After fleeing the Salvador mansion, Mark went straight to this place for two reasons. One was to fetch water before returning, and another was to create a temporary container for the 5 blood children he had just retrieved and put them inside his bag. He searched for an animal nearby and found a feral evolved dog easily after he let the smell of his blood scatter around the area. The poor dog became materials for the container of the little critters and a rather large gallon for the water he came to fetch. After he had just finished the containers and was about to start making the gallon, he heard noises not far from him. Obviously, it was a person. Who would come to a dangerous forest in the middle of the night? Of course, it was either people who had no choice to traverse the forest or those people who had a death wish. Unexpectedly, it was actually the latter. Furthermore, Mark knew who it was. He stealthily approached the area where the noise was coming from and saw the person. It was Edsel, who currently punching a tree like a character from a blocky game. Unfortunately, the atmosphere around him was not light and his face was filled with remorse. Furthermore, he was glancing at the river nearby from time to time as if thinking of something and hesitating at the same time. Mark felt what he was thinking though. What a weak person. He thought. With his loved one betraying him, he was thinking of killing himself in that deep river with a strong current. However, he could not make himself determined enough to do so. The poor fellow could only release his frustrations on the tree that would never be able to fight back. Seeing this, Mark could not help but felt amazed at his coincidence. He thought recruiting this person due to some reasons, but to think that he would come to this forest to attempt suicide nearby the area where he was working. If it was not like this, it was likely that he would not be able to find this person again. Since he planned on recruiting this person, it was quite convenient to do so this time. You can punch that tree till it breaks, but what your frustrations won't decrease at all, you know that. Mark went out of hiding and spoke. Still, the boy was surprised at the sudden appearance of a person in the middle of the forest and staggered backwards. Who? Without thinking about what he should say, Mark spoke. "Don't be scared, I'm not someone suspicious," and he almost smacked himself. Anyone who said that line was people who were rather suspicious. In fact, Edsel became even more guarded against him. Sighing for his mistake, he said, "What are you afraid of? Didn't you already think of killing yourself after your lover left you?" Edsel then realized what Mark was talking about and could only let out a bitter smile as tears accumulated at the corner of his eyes. "You're a man, right? A real man shouldn't cry when you are not the one in the wrong. You are not the one in the wrong." "No, I'm also wrong in this. My mistake is that I could not provide what Pearl needed and wanted." Mark then smiled. "Because you were weak. You?" Edsel stared at Mark wide-eyed. He was thinking how he found Mark's voice familiar, but when he said that reason, he finally remembered. The whisper he heard before came from the person in front of him. Ignoring the surprised expression of Edsel, Mark continued. "Really, you're not the one with the fault in your relationship. Tell me, didn't you do all what you can for her? Even if you were weak as a normal person, you did things no matter hard to satisfy her, am I right?" Mark enumerated his assumptions from the emotions that he could detect and absorb from Edsel. The boy in question could only look down in reflection of his actions in the past. What he had just heard from the person in front of him was true. He did a lot of things for her and to satisfy her, even dangerous things in order to get what she wanted and what she needed. And yet, wanting an easy way out, she left him. "Because I am weak compared to them," Edsel muttered. "Yep." Mark nodded. "You're a normal person, so you are weak. Compared to evolvers and mutators, you are nothing but a child. You can't even compare what you can do to what they can do." The boy even felt more helpless as he leaned his back to the tree he was punching just now and slid down to the ground. But then, he heard a sentence that made everything in his mind freeze. "But it didn't mean that you will stay weak forever, right? You are still young, and what you can do right now is way better than other normal people with the same age as you. Tell me." Mark smiled as his eyes turned red with a chilling glow. "Do you want to become stronger?" He let out a line that demons always say to entice desperate people. "If you follow me and give me your loyalty, I promise that you can make that ungrateful girl regret her decision today. I promise you that you won't need to punch a helpless tree anymore and punch the people that made you suffer directly." Edsel looked up and saw Mark's devilish glowing eyes, and yet, he was not afraid but felt more like the fiendish glow was his way for salvation. "See, can you really do that? I'm someone who doesn't break my promises. Follow me and leave this place. By the time that you return here, you won't need to ask for people's favor and it will be the other way around." Mark then stretched his right hand towards Edsel and the boy accepted the opportunity given to him. "Return to the settlement first and pack up your things. I will find you before we leave." "Yes, what should I call you?" "Mark. But since you will follow me from now on, you can just call me boss like the others." "Yes, boss." Edsel felt gratified. He did not know if what Mark said was true or why Mark chose him, but he wanted this opportunity. Inside his heart, he still loved Pearl, but he also wanted her to regret her decision to leave him. Remembering how that man walked with Pearl away, his love for her started to die. After Edsel left the forest safely with Mark's guidance, Mark, who was left, sighed. "Can you come out now? He's your son, right? Why aren't you doing anything and just watch while hiding?" Mark spoke as he gazed at a tree nearby. Knowing that he was exposed, a tall, handsome, non-muscular man with golden hair, pale skin, pale-colored eyes and leaf-shaped ears came out of hiding. He was wearing a golden tribal crown and was wearing nothing but a tribal-designed loincloth to cover his private parts. Looking at the man, Mark knew. He was not a human. The person was an elemental people in the Philippines called Tamawo.